If you dance this tango, I'll marry you right here in front of everyone. Derek Hampton's voice echoed through the crystal ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, cutting through the elegant conversations like a sharp blade. The millionaire raised his glass of Dom Perignon champagne, his blue eyes shining with that cruel arrogance that only unlimited money can create. Around him, Manhattan's elite burst into laughter, as if they had just heard the funniest joke of the year. At the center of that circus of humiliation was her. Kesha Williams, 28, dressed in the impeccable white apron of the cleaning staff, held a tray of empty glasses with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. For 8 years she had worked at that luxury hotel, invisible as a ghost among the rich and powerful. Laughter echoed through the Italian marble hall like stray bullets. Women in Versace dresses covered their mouths with silk gloves, feigning scandal. Men in Armani tuxedos leaned toward each other, whispering venomous comments about people who don't know their place. Derek took a theatrical step toward Kesha, his $1,000 Italian shoes pounding the floor with the authority of someone who had never heard no. "Come on, sweetheart," he said with that shark-like smile he used to close million-dollar deals. "Don't be shy. Show us all how an ordinary person dances the tango." The word ordinary came out of his mouth like poison masked as honey. The audience laughed even louder, some even applauding the genius of the public humiliation. Kesha took a deep breath. Her fingers gripped the tray hard enough to break the glass, but something strange happened. Instead of lowering her head or running away in shame as everyone expected, she slowly raised her chin. Very slowly. In Kesha's dark eyes shone something that none of those millionaires could identify. It wasn't fear, it wasn't shame. It was something much more dangerous, absolute certainty. "Are you sure about this proposal, Mr. Hampton?" Her voice cut through the air with an icy calm that made some people's laughter die in their throats. Derek blinked, momentarily taken aback. That wasn't the reaction he had expected. "Of course I'm sure," he replied, forcing a nervous laugh. "But I doubt you know what a real tango is." What Derek Hampton didn't know, what no one in that gilded hall knew, was that Kesha Williams wasn't exactly who she appeared to be. For years, she had watched their every move, every cruel word, every gesture of contempt. And for years, she had prepared for this moment. While everyone sneered, waiting to see her stumble and humiliate herself, Kesha carefully placed the tray on the nearest table. The sound of the glasses clinking was like a bell announcing that something extraordinary was about to begin. If this story of prejudice and revenge is already getting to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what happened next in that Manhattan ballroom was so surprising that it changed the lives of everyone present forever, especially that of the arrogant Derek Hampton. Derek's predatory smile widened when he saw Kesha accept the challenge. For him, this was better than any entertainment he could have hired for the party. "Excellent," he exclaimed, clapping his hands theatrically. "Let's put on a show for our friends." The orchestra hired for the evening, 5 musicians in tuxedos who normally played only for the elite, looked nervously at each other. The lead violinist whispered something to the pianist, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding. "Play an Argentine tango," Derek ordered, waving dismissively at the musicians. "Something exotic. It suits the occasion." The word exotic came out of his mouth laden with thinly veiled prejudice. Victoria Ashford, heiress to a banking dynasty, covered her mouth with her ostrich feather fan. "Derek, you're terrible," she said between giggles. "The poor thing is going to humiliate herself completely." Her voice carried that false compassion that rich people use when they want to appear kind while watching others suffer. Richard Pemberton, owner of a rival hotel chain, adjusted his Patek Philippe watch and commented to the group next to him, "I bet 10,000 she won't last 30 seconds without stumbling. People like her don't have the coordination to really dance." Kesha heard every word, every cruel laugh, every poisonous comment. But something surprising was happening inside her. Instead of shrinking or feeling ashamed, she felt a deep calmness take over her body. It was as if a familiar voice whispered in her mind, "Now is the time, my daughter." For 8 years, she had cleaned those halls, served those people, listened to their private conversations about dirty business, extramarital affairs, and questionable financial schemes. For 8 years, she had been invisible enough that they spoke freely in front of her, as if she were a piece of furniture. What none of them knew was that Kesha Williams wasn't just a cleaning lady who needed a job. She had graduated with honors in business administration from Columbia University, had worked for 2 years at a reputable auditing firm, and was only there for one very specific reason. 3 years ago, Derek Hampton had destroyed her father's life. Samuel Williams had been the chief accountant at one of Derek's smaller companies for 15 years. A man of integrity, he had discovered irregularities in the accounting books, millions of dollars diverted to offshore accounts, employees being robbed of their benefits, taxes systematically evaded. When Samuel took the evidence to Derek, hoping he would correct the mistakes, he was fired on the spot. Worse, Derek planted false evidence suggesting that Samuel was responsible for the embezzlement. Within 48 hours, a respected member of the community became a pariah. No one would hire him. The family lost their home, their dignity, everything. Samuel Williams died of a heart attack 6 months later, at the age of 52, his heart broken by injustice. Derek never knew he had a daughter. And now she was there, in the center of his golden hall, ready to make him pay in a way he would never forget. "Come on, dear," Derek held out his hand with an air of superiority. "Show us what you're capable of. But don't worry if you can't keep up. I know people like you haven't had adequate educational opportunities." The audience's laughter echoed again, louder and crueler this time. A woman with diamonds around her neck commented, "It's almost cruel to put her through this. But it's so educational." Kesha took a deep breath and, for the first time in years, smiled. It wasn't a submissive or nervous smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to reveal a long-held secret. She took a step toward Derek, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him blink, confused. For a microscopic moment, he felt something strange, as if he were looking not at a frightened maid, but at a predator who had just spotted her prey. "I'm sure it will be memorable," Kesha said, her voice low but laden with something Derek couldn't quite identify. The orchestra began to play, the first melancholy notes of the bandoneon floating through the air. Derek reached out his hand, still convinced he was in control of the situation. What he couldn't have imagined was that for the past 3 years, while pretending to be just another invisible cleaning lady, Kesha had carefully documented every crime, every scheme, every incriminating conversation she had witnessed in those halls. And tonight, right in front of Manhattan's corrupt elite, she would finally collect the debt Derek Hampton owed to her father's memory. Every humiliation he tried to inflict on her only fueled a silent strength that grew inside her chest, not anger, but unwavering determination. What those arrogant millionaires didn't know was that every cruel word was sealing their own fate, writing line by line the sentence they would soon receive. The first notes of the Argentine tango filled the hall like a living presence. The bandoneon wept its melancholy, while the violin responded with burning passion. Derek reached out to Kesha, his smile still laden with that arrogance that had become his trademark. When she placed her hand in his, Derek felt something unexpected. There was no tremor, no insecurity. Kesha's fingers were firm, calloused from work, but there was a confidence in that touch that disconcerted him for a split second. "Relax, sweetheart," he whispered, pulling her closer with unnecessary force. "Just try not to trip over my feet." The audience laughed at the cruel joke, but the laughter quickly died when they saw Kesha's posture. She didn't cower. Instead, she positioned herself with a natural elegance that made several people in the audience blink, confused. Her shoulders were straight, her center of gravity perfectly balanced, and when the music struck the first strong beat, she was the one who took the first step. Derek stumbled. "What the hell?" he muttered, trying to regain control, but Kesha had already set the pace. Her feet moved with a precision that defied any logical explanation for that audience of millionaires. Each step was calculated, each turn executed with a fluidity that made the simple skirt of her uniform fly like silk. In the third row, a gray-haired man's eyes widened. Antonio Valdez, owner of one of the largest dance academies in the city, leaned forward, completely forgetting the conversation he was having. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "This technique, where did she learn this?" Victoria Ashford stopped laughing. Her hands, which seconds before had held the fan with disdain, now trembled slightly. "Richard," she whispered to the man beside her, "are you seeing this? She knows what she's doing." Derek tried to impose his rhythm, forcing a more aggressive sequence, hoping she would get confused. But Kesha anticipated every move. When he tried to spin her brutally, she turned the violence into an elegant pirouette that drew an involuntary gasp from the audience. "Who are you?" Derek whispered through clenched teeth, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. The question was laden not with curiosity, but with something much more primitive, fear. Kesha smiled for the first time that night, not a submissive smile, but one that made Derek's blood run cold. "I am Samuel Williams' daughter," she said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "Do you remember him?" The name hit Derek like a punch in the stomach. His feet faltered for a second, almost knocking them both over, but Kesha supported him with surprising strength, keeping the dance flowing without breaking the rhythm. In the audience, no one noticed the micro-expression of panic that flashed across Derek's face. They were all mesmerized by the transformation they were witnessing. The woman who minutes earlier had been carrying trays now dominated the center of the room with a mastery that made Derek, by contrast, look clumsy. What Manhattan's elite didn't know was that 3 specific people at that party were not there by chance. Marcus Rodriguez, a private investigator who had been secretly hired by Kesha 6 months earlier, was discreetly filming everything from a dark corner of the room. Every word, every gesture Derek made was being documented. At the appetizer table, Jennifer Chun, an investigative journalist for the New York Herald disguised as a waitress, adjusted the tiny microphone hidden in her blouse. She had been tracking Derek's schemes for 2 years, and Kesha had become her most valuable source. At the upper balcony, watching everything with an almost imperceptible smile, was David Williams, Samuel's younger brother, a federal attorney specializing in financial crimes. For 3 years, he and Kesha had carefully built a case that would be impervious to any defense Derek could mount. The music intensified, and with it, the dance. Kesha now led without pretense, and Derek, somewhere between humiliated and terrified, was forced to follow. With each beat, she whispered memories that only the 2 of them could understand. "He cried when he found out you planted that evidence," she murmured during an intimate turn. "My father always believed you would do the right thing." "You're crazy," Derek replied, trying to keep his voice low. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do," Kesha spun again, this time leaving him dizzy. 15 million in offshore accounts. Taxes evaded for 5 years. Employee salaries systematically embezzled. Want me to go on? Derek's face drained of color. How could she know such specific numbers? How could she have information that even his own lawyers didn't fully know? The truth was more devastating than he could have imagined. For 8 years of pretending to be invisible, Kesha had photographed documents, recorded conversations, copied files left open on computers during her nighttime cleaning sessions. Every crime, every scheme, every compromising conversation was meticulously catalogued in a digital vault that Derek would never discover. "Tonight isn't about dancing," Kesha whispered as the music approached its climax. "It's about justice. And you're going to find out that some debts take years to collect, but they always come due." The audience erupted in spontaneous applause. The performance had been so intense, so emotionally charged, that even the most prejudiced couldn't deny what they had witnessed: pure art. But as everyone applauded the dance, Derek finally understood the terrifying truth. This had not been a humiliation gone wrong. It had been a trap executed with surgical precision, and he had fallen right into it, in front of witnesses, cameras, and recorders he never even knew existed. For a moment, as the applause echoed through the hall like thunder, everyone thought they were witnessing the unexpected triumph of a humble employee. But what they were really witnessing was the first act of a symphony of justice that Kesha Williams had carefully composed over 3 long years, and Derek Hampton was about to discover that the music had only just begun. The last chord of the tango still vibrated in the air when Kesha slipped out of Derek's trembling arms. For a moment, the silence was absolute, the kind of heavy silence that precedes earthquakes. Derek wiped the sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of his tuxedo, trying to regain his composure. "All right," he said in a strained voice, addressing the audience. "I hope you enjoyed our little social experiment." A few nervous laughs echoed through the hall, but something had changed. The energy in the room was no longer the same. The guests looked at each other uneasily, as if sensing that the show was not over. "Social experiment?" Kesha repeated, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "It's interesting that you use that expression, Derek. Especially considering that I have here with me the results of a much longer experiment." Derek frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Kesha walked calmly to a side table where she had left her bag, something no one had noticed before. From inside it, she took out a sleek tablet and a small Bluetooth speaker. 8 years of experimentation, she said, connecting the devices. To be exact. "You're delusional," Derek laughed nervously, but his eyes couldn't look away from the tablet. Security. Someone get this woman out of here. Oh, but Derek, Kesha smiled, and for the first time everyone could see that it wasn't a kind smile. I think you'll want to hear this. Especially since I recorded our little chat today. She tapped the screen. Derek's voice filled the room, crystal clear. You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. And then Kesha's voice. 15 million in offshore accounts. Taxes evaded for 5 years. Employee salaries systematically embezzled. Want me to go on? Manhattan's elite stood petrified. Some guests dropped their glasses, which shattered on the marble floor like the silence that had been broken. You can't have recorded that. Derek stammered, his face draining of color. It's illegal. It's worthless. Actually, Derek, a male voice sounded from the upper balcony. David Williams descended the stairs with the calmness of someone who had always known this moment would come. In New York, only one party needs to consent to the recording. And my niece here consented. Murmurs exploded through the audience. Niece. Williams. The accountant who died, they whispered to each other, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. Derek staggered backward. David Williams, but you disappeared 3 years ago. Promoted to the FBI, Financial Crimes Division, David showed his federal ID. Specializing in dismantling schemes just like yours. Victoria Ashford rose from her chair, the diamonds on her neck trembling. Derek, what are they talking about? What 15 million? Kesha touched the screen again. This time, a different recording filled the room, a conversation Derek had had 2 years earlier, right there in that same place, during another party. The auditors will never find out, Derek's voice sounded crystal clear. Who's going to suspect we embezzled money from employee benefits? They're just manual laborers. The cruel laughter that followed made several people in the audience recoil in disgust. Jennifer Chun, the undercover journalist, approached with her professional recorder now in plain sight. Mr. Hampton, would you like to comment on these allegations for the New York Herald? Get out of here. Derek yelled, but his voice came out shrill, desperate. All of you. This is my property. Actually, Marcus Rodriguez emerged from the shadows with a professional camera still rolling. It's not anymore. He handed Derek a sealed envelope. Federal seizure order. Signed 2 hours ago. Derek tore open the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the document. That's impossible. How did you? 8 years, Derek, Kesha said, approaching him with the calmness of a predator finally catching its prey. 8 years cleaning your offices. 8 years listening to your phone conversations. 8 years photographing documents you left lying around because you believed I was just human furniture. She tapped the tablet again. This time, it wasn't audio, it was video. Derek appeared on the screen, clearly drunk at a Christmas party the previous year, bragging to a group of businessmen. The trick is to get employees to sign contracts they don't understand. Especially Latinos and blacks. They never read the fine print. I've stolen millions with this strategy alone. A cry of outrage echoed through the audience. Antonio Valdez, the owner of the dance academy, spat on the floor. Disgusting, he exclaimed, and several other guests echoed his sentiment. Richard Pemberton, the owner of the hotel chain, moved away from Derek as if he were carrying a contagious disease. You're crazy if you think I'm going to continue doing business with you. Wait. Derek ran after him, desperate. Richard, you don't understand. They're taking this out of context. But Richard was already leaving, along with other businessmen. In a matter of minutes, the hall that had been crowded with bootlickers was now quickly emptying. Kesha continued, relentless. I have 237 hours of recordings. 42 photographed documents. Evidence of tax evasion, systematic racial discrimination, sexual harassment of employees, and daddy's favorite, falsification of evidence to incriminate an honest accountant. The mention of her father made Kesha's voice tremble slightly, but not from fear, from a righteous anger that had waited years to be channeled. Derek fell to his knees on the marble floor he had once walked on like a king. Please, he whispered, his arrogance completely evaporated. I can pay. I can make it up to you. How much do you want? David Williams approached with the handcuffs already in his hands. Derek Hampton, You are under arrest for tax evasion, racial discrimination, workplace harassment, and conspiracy to defraud employees. As the handcuffs closed around Derek's wrists, Kesha leaned in to whisper in his ear, "My father died believing you would do the right thing. I've lived these 8 years knowing you would do the exact opposite. The difference between us is that I was prepared." Derek's last words before being dragged away by federal agents were a pathetic moan, "This can't be happening." But it was. And as the sirens approached the hotel, the few guests who remained in the ballroom looked at Kesha no longer as a cleaning lady, but as something much more dangerous, a woman who had turned 8 years of silent humiliation into the most devastating lesson injustice Manhattan had ever witnessed. Derek Hampton's empire had not just collapsed, it had been carefully and systematically demolished, brick by brick, by someone he never considered smart enough to be a threat. 6 months after the night that shook Manhattan, Derek Hampton knew the gray walls of the New York Federal Penitentiary intimately. His $15 million empire had been confiscated by the government, his assets auctioned off to compensate the employees he had stolen from. His former elite friends no longer answered his calls from prison. Victoria Ashford, questioned by the press about her friendship with Derek, stated coldly, "I never really knew him. They were just superficial social encounters." The hypocrisy of the rich in protecting their own reputations knew no bounds. Richard Pemberton publicly admitted that he had always been suspicious of Derek's questionable practices, conveniently rewriting the story of his silent complicity. Meanwhile, Kesha Williams signed the contract that would change her life forever. Penguin Random House had offered a $2 million advance for her autobiography, Invisible: How 8 Years of Humiliation Became My Greatest Revenge. "Ms. Williams," said the editor-in-chief, "your story has touched millions of people. Pre-sales have already exceeded 500,000 copies." The 45th floor office in Manhattan, overlooking Central Park, now belonged to the Samuel Williams Foundation, an organization created by Kesha to provide college scholarships to children of employees who were victims of corporate exploitation. David Williams, promoted to head of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, visited regularly to update Kesha on new cases. 16 businessmen were indicted using the evidence you collected, he reported proudly. "Your work has set a legal precedent." Jennifer Chun had won the Pulitzer Prize for her investigative series on racial exploitation in the American corporate environment, based entirely on evidence provided by Kesha. "You didn't just get revenge," Jennifer said during the celebratory lunch. "You changed the system." The most surprising thing happened 3 months after Derek's arrest. Antonio Valdez, the respected owner of the dance academy, sought Kesha out personally. "That night at the hotel was an awakening," he confessed. "I realized that I had also perpetuated silent prejudices. I would like to offer full dance scholarships to young people from underserved communities. You inspired me to make a difference." Valdez's academy now had 50 scholarship recipients, many from backgrounds similar to Kesha's. She visited monthly, not as a teacher, but as a mentor and living inspiration. Derek, from the back of his cell, watched the news about the meteoric growth of the Samuel Williams Foundation. Each report was a stab at his shattered pride. The woman he had humiliated for entertainment was now celebrated nationally as a symbol of resistance and justice. In the cell next door, his fellow inmate muttered, "Man, you really screwed yourself with this story. The woman became a celebrity and you became an example of what not to do." Kesha never visited him in prison. Not out of cruelty, but because she had understood a fundamental truth: the best revenge is not to watch your enemy suffer, it is to build something greater than he could ever destroy. During an interview on Good Morning America, the host asked, "Kesha, do you hold a grudge against Derek Hampton?" "Grudges are a luxury I can't afford," she replied calmly. "My father always said that anger consumes those who carry it. Derek is already paying for his choices. My focus now is to ensure that other families don't go through what we went through." The legacy of Samuel Williams, which Derek had tried to erase with false accusations, now shone brighter than ever through the daughter he had completely underestimated. 3 years later, when Derek was released from prison on parole, he found a world that had moved on without him. Kesha Williams was one of the most sought-after speakers in the country. Her foundation had distributed $15 million in college scholarships, and her name was on the Forbes list of America's most influential women. Derek tried for a job as an accountant at a small company in the countryside. During the interview, the manager Googled his name. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hampton, but we can't risk our reputation." True justice had not been his temporary imprisonment, but the fact that while he languished in obscurity, the woman he had tried to humiliate had built an empire of hope on the ashes of his prejudice. Kesha proved that the most devastating revenge is not to destroy your enemy, it is to surpass them so completely that they become irrelevant. Sometimes the best response to humiliation is success so resounding that it makes your oppressors realize how small they always were. If this story of transformation touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Share your own experience of overcoming adversity in the comments, and discover more inspiring stories that prove that dignity always triumphs over arrogance.